Hello, this is Truth Be Told Transformation, and I'm Bonnie Burkert, here to share tools for transformation to live your highest truth. One thing that's true for me is that at the time of this taping, October, it is certainly a magical time of year. So I'm very, very excited to welcome, all the way from Australia, a person that is a magical mentor and really can turn us on to a lot of his point of view on where magic and witchcraft comes into daily living, but also a reverence for the past and the places where it came from. Welcome, Fio Gede Parma.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Very much so. So, Fio, we're going to just kick off by letting everybody know that you've got a new book, and we're really pleased that Llewellyn introduced you to us. The book is called The Witch Belongs to the World, A Spell of Becoming. So yes. I would like to, can we talk a little bit about that spell? Can we talk about the spell of becoming? What would somebody encounter when reading the book?
Yeah, look, it's kind of the whole point I wrote it, I guess, but that spell is one of discovering and, anchoring into the magic that is personal to the witch who's casting it, but it is also moving through like space and time and history and folklore, which is very important to me, and then kind of retrieving and representing oneself within that in new and vital ways. And it is essentially transformative, initiatory. The way the book is structured is it can take you towards one of the last great workings in the book, which is a very audacious act of initiation, via the spirits and the current of witchcraft herself. So, it's becoming in the sense that we are emergent, unfolding, ever transforming beings, basically.
Yeah, okay, that's great. And that's certainly what we're all about here, very much so. Now, I titled our show New Magic, and I just felt that I really liked from an initial look at your book and the other work that you're putting out there and that I see on the website. I feel like you've got a unique take in a lot of ways. So I appreciate your new point of view. And yet you are looking back at the old. So you mentioned things like folklore, and I know I've read from the introduction of your book the importance of the country of our origin, and of the origin of some of these practices. So tell us a little bit about how that became an area of focus for you.
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning of this book is a practice called acknowledgement of country, which is an active solidarity with Indigenous peoples wherever one is. So I'm not Indigenous to Australia. I was born in Bali, but there is a protocol in this continent that I live in where someone who is not Indigenous, or even is not from that part of that continent, because there's many different lands within this continent that are, sacred to different Indigenous peoples. So it's an acknowledgement of colonization. It's an acknowledgement of solidarity with them. That's what it is. It's a really important act. Most witches and pagans in Australia enact it. Most people enact it actually these days. And certainly the book also gets into, the significance of one's ancestry and how that can impact one's magic. But it is also all about the places where different roads and rivers collide as well, and kind of being able to be with the complexity. I think one of the things that witchcraft is very good at is it doesn't reduce things down. It is able to be with nuance and complexity in fierce and compassionate ways.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. So I'd like to ask a little bit more about your background. So you mentioned Bali. I know you're in Australia right now. So tell us a little bit about the textures of your history and the lore that comes with what you've studied there locally, because this is my first opportunity speaking to a witch from Australia.
Yeah, well, so born in Bali, but I was raised in Australia. But my father is a Balinese man who continues to live there. And I have lived there as an adult. I have gone back and forth to that island many times. And my parents are still married. My mother is an Australian of Irish and Scottish and English descent. And so I'm also very interested in the Celtic, lore and mythos and practices of her ancestors. That definitely does infuse a great deal of what I do. And that mixes together with the animistic and Hindu traditions of Bali that are the primary traditions of Bali. And so that kind of had me really able to immerse and embed in magic and ceremony, divination, mediumship, ancestral veneration from the get-go. And then here where I live, and I've lived most of my life in different parts of the east coast of this Australian continent, I have very respectfully not gone too deep into stuff that isn't for me, but I do listen to the land, and I do have dear friends who are also witches, some who are not, who are Aboriginal people, and whenever they share anything from any perspective, I deeply listen. But I guess it all comes down to the fact that the ancient, ever-renewing law of country, as it is called here, is in the land, is in the sky, is in the river, is in the people. And so if one just humbly listens, one can encounter that. And so that's the basic premise of a lot of spirituality here. Yes,
I agree fully, and yet am fascinated by what you can get from where. So the differences, what it feels like in, say, Hawaii versus the Great Lakes versus, I don't know, the red rocks of Utah. So I really like listening to the land, so it's fascinating to me. Oh, and I'll mention, I actually had a chance to see Uluru and be in the center of your country in that magical region as well, listening carefully.
Yeah.
Steeping in the land.
I've never actually been to Uluru. I recently got back from another part of the desert. I mean, there's a lot of desert here.
Yeah.
And it was profound. I had not really been that far into the desert. A lot of people who grow up here don't really go that far into the desert. But those of us who have had that opportunity, we always come back very renewed. It's very there's a lot of words like cleansing, healing. They seem a little dismissive when I say them, actually, because they're not enough to really encapsulate the deep calm, actually, that I felt when I was out there, this kind of omnipresent calm. And in Bali, it's very different. You were talking about the different textures and different lands. Bali is on the Ring of Fire. It's volcanic. There are active volcanoes. My father's village is literally right up against one of the active volcanoes in Bali that has erupted several times in the last few decades. So it's that people who go to Bali often comment on that as well, like the intense fiery. The intense fieriness, of that island, and so that does therefore impact the cultures that develop in a place, because human cultures, I mean, we even use that word, it develops kind of organically in relationship to the ecological realities of a place, and so that very potent, throbbing, chthonic, earthy fire vibe definitely impacts the language, the art, the ceremony, the ritual tradition, and here there's again the people that I'm in most intimacy with who are indigenous to this place, these countries along the east coast of so-called Australia. There's a lot of relationship to whales. There's a lot of relationship to water and honey. And the list goes on, really, and I barely know anything about the real stuff, but yeah, it's fascinating along the east coast right now, because it's summer for us, or it's coming into the summer season right now. The whales coming back down from having been up in the Great Barrier Reef, and so Whereas in April and May, we were like feeling them come up and seeing them and watching them come up the East Coast. Now they're coming back down 6 months later. And that is also an important sacred timer here as well, the whale people and their songs.
Absolutely. Wow, that's such a cool perspective. I really like that. I want to ask, since we're talking about south of the border and the flip of season, I mentioned at the top of the show about this being October here, right? So we've got Halloween. I mean, this is the start of the dark half of the year in the northern hemisphere. And obviously tons of tradition around shadows and darkness, right? What is it like down there when you are flipping the seasons, yet you are observing the wheel of the year?
Yeah.
So tell me what a practice might be. Whereas for us, we're moving into the dream time. There's vitality right now. So I just would love to see how you're working with that in terms of the traditions of Samhain.
Well, we don't celebrate Samhain at this time of year. That's the thing. So we celebrate Beltane. So one of the things that we just flip, the whole wheel is flipped.
You do. Okay.
Yeah. So because those festivals are seasonal, when people started observing them here, they were just flipped. It was completely. It would be honestly ridiculous if they weren't. And so because we can't celebrate the summer solstice in our middle of our winter. So we go from our winter solstice, which is our longest night, our coldest time, which is in the middle of June. Obviously, it's opposite for you, as you know, and then we just go from there. And so every 6.5 weeks, which break up those 8 festivals, you come to the next one. And so for us, we're coming to Beltane. The vast majority, or almost every witch pagan, anyone who venerates the Wheel of the Year, here has long ago, flipped that. It's not even really a question. If when we do encounter the odd group or individual, we almost always we know that it's either like some very hidebound group who kind of is like, well, we're going to do it the way they do it in the north because, and it's like, okay, whatever, have fun. And then usually it's someone who's just begun and they've been reading books and it says do this and they haven't really remembered in that moment. That's right, because it's seasonal.
The seasons, yes.
Yeah. And so, almost all of us down here who connect to that, we're all celebrating Beltane or Bealtaine, which is the Irish, one of the Irish ways of saying that. And also is the word for May in Irish to this day. So these festivals are like, they're very alive for us. And for those of us who are interested in connecting to Celtic mythos, as I said before, like for me, the study of the language, the Irish language and the Scottish language, which is kind of the same, kind of different, like that is, very much also at the heart of a lot of my practice. I'm one of those people who highly values tradition, but if tradition is unnecessarily stifling or out of its context, then of course, tradition is also meant to be innovated. That's also a part of its DNA. Is tradition is meant to adapt to new situations, new landscapes, new points of view. Like that's actually kind of encoded into it because it's also meant to survive. So if it's too brittle and hidebound, it will just end. So that's kind of I was born with Saturn and Uranus conjunct exactly in Sagittarius. So the way I understand that astrologically, and as someone who is ruled by Saturn in my chart as well, I'm very into structure. I'm very into things that are old. I'm very into the roots of things, but conjunct exactly with Uranus, exactly to the degree. And so while I love all of that stuff, I'm also kind of was born. Part of my sense of purpose in this life is to also question and provoke it as well. Excellent.
So let's talk about your background a little bit in this, because it's from what I read, you discovered this quite young. And again, I want to sort of reiterate what you said. There are traditions, and a lot of what we're talking about with with the craft, with witchcraft is, I mean, and folklore. I mean, these are traditions which are wonderful, and yet at the same time, it must breathe and evolve so that future generations can continue to use it and revere it, and maybe explore and celebrate the old. So I'd love to see how you'd figure that out, how you found a balance between the two worlds.
Well, I guess I fully, because I understood who I was when I was quite young, just in terms of like, I guess I felt this strong sense of destiny, which is how it felt at the time, and kind of how it still feels like I just knew what I was meant to be doing, and so I fully and thoroughly gave myself to it, and I would study, and I still take a lot in, and then I did end up going through the rites of initiation and 4 different traditions of witchcraft, which is really, I don't make any of those. I didn't make any of those journeys lightly. They all mean something very important to me to this day, and they're very alive in me. And I teach traditionally. I initiate people traditionally. So all of that is still at the heart of my practice. But I guess one of the things I'm really big on, especially when I do one-to-one mentorship with people, or just talking to anyone in my life, is how is this relevant to every nook and cranny of your life? I have this saying that initiation touches everything, and everything touches initiation, and it really is meant to unravel and take, and dismantle and renew and reforge all of our lives. And that's why I also kind of warn people before they step onto that road. Do you really want to have all that is insubstantial or that is not working, even if you don't know that yet or can't see that yet? Do you really want that pulled out from under you? And do you really want to be changed forever? And so, that's a big deal. And a lot of people say yes, maybe without realizing what they're saying yes to, because how can you really know what that will mean on the other side? But
It is.
I guess that's human nature as well, and for me too. But I guess if you have a strong enough arrow towards it, or a strong enough, willingness that you feel fated towards it, then, that's going to bring up a lot of opportunity for a person to discover how they can relate all of this to every other aspect of their life. And really, it's kind of, for me, that's the point. The point is that the craft, the magic of it all, is meant to kind of unbox a lot of things, and is meant to hone our attention and focus into unexamined areas of our lives, and to help us, dance with our own demons, and to work with our complexes and release them, or to at least bring illumination to them if they can't be unraveled just yet. And it's a lot about retrieving and reclaiming our lost power, and maybe we submitted it accidentally, or had to consciously at some time, or it was stolen or hidden. And so a lot of the work is like, an apprentice witch is really about that. It's about retrieving, identifying lost power, and going through an incredibly rigorous healing journey that doesn't always feel good. So that really can look different on different people. It will look different on different people, but it's the same craft that flows through it.
Exactly, and the right things happen, but it's not the destination, right? So it's the journey.
Yeah.
How we handle the journey. Now, you are somebody, as a magical mentor, you are somebody that works with people in different ways, and I know divination is part of it. So I'd like to ask about that. I mean, you mentioned the tarot, and yet I feel that I think that you also told me that you're doing some interesting work with angels and having some understanding of how they also work with this practice in particular. So please weave us some tales around that to help us understand how you use all these different tools.
Yeah, well, the tarot came to me very early on as well. And I just, So there's a very famous witch called Starhawk.
Sure.
She's a mother of the reclaiming tradition, which is a tradition I am involved in and teach. And she has this really interesting story where she talks about, I think it was her mother? I don't know, someone placed a typewriter in her lap, and she had this like sinking feeling of like, oh, I'm going to be at this a lot in my life. So when I was handed my first tarot deck when I was, it was just before I turned 14. So I still would have been 13 years old. But when I was handed it, I was in a ritual circle. It was for a midwinter ritual. There was a few witches. We're out in the countryside, and there were bonfires. It was beautiful. And part of the law of Yule is that you give each other gifts. And one of the kind of central kind of organizing witches of that small coven handed me this tarot deck. And when I was handed it, I felt a very similar feeling. I felt, oh, I'm going to be with this for a long time. So tarot has often been in past years the thing that saved me quite literally financially. Like when I have been struggling with work, I can always turn to the tarot and can always just be like, okay, just go back into full-time reading, and I will experience many things. When someone is reading for strangers, one is faced directly with humanity. Anyone and everyone seeks the tarot, seeks the oracle, seeks readers. It's really quite humbling and quite exciting to behold the vast diversity of people who come to the tarot. What I love about the tarot is it's a very active, intelligent. I often think of the tarot as its own hive of benevolent advice and direction.
Mm-hmm.
And what I have also learned for myself, and I've watched with many clients, many beloveds, is that tarot is almost always accurate. So it's like, please listen to it. Because, so many times I have because I'm always into agency and free will, even in the, humans are also very predictable. So it's kind of easy to predict things, but because we behave so consistently, or even over decades. But what's interesting about the tarot is, it just seems to be able to directly, specifically mirror things for people. And I've often said to people, oh, look, you can do whatever you want. You can ignore all of this, and you might. But my advice to you is that you don't. Because almost anyone in my life who, whether they were a stranger to me at the time or a friend, or maybe I vaguely knew them, when a prediction was made about the future, and they kind of, and I always get people to record readings so they actually have evidence. So when they decide to go against that advice, and then something really horrible happens, I'm like, oh, so I just want you to remember that the tarot was there for you, and then maybe in future when you come back and get another reading, because some of these people are the type of people who get readings every few months, which is not even recommended. But I'm like, so next time you do come back to the tarot, I want you to remember this, and then come. It's very human to do that. That's so human and so fine. But I just want you to remember that, the tarot does have your best interests at heart, and it sees further along the curve and arc of time. So I have just learned that lesson has been constantly reiterated in my life, constantly. And then jumping over to angels, a lot of people out there, I was never drawn much to the angelic lore. I could easily see, on the bookshelves or in the vicinity around me, because it just seemed very out of its context, even as a young kid who didn't grow up Christian, who didn't really understand what angels were from that perspective, even though angels are obviously not religious, they're not connected to a human religion. But as I started studying the older lore, and some of that lore is, in the old understandings of the Bible itself, one begins to come across this really strong idea, consistent throughout time and across culture, that what we call angels, which is just a Greek word for messenger, is they're very, actually quite terrifying. Often in the Bible, they come and they say, fear not or be not afraid. That is the first thing they say to someone, because obviously they're very intense looking or feeling or sounding, and the person is quite scared. And so when I started having experiences with those beings, these vast kind of interstellar, as a teenager, I was like, whoa, what is this? It was quite an intense period of my life. And I began to realize what they were, and then working with them. And they are, they're crucial in so many of, forms of ceremonial magic and hermetic magic and different forms of magic that prize astrology. Astrology and angelic law is very linked to ancient cultures. The looking up at the stars and the understanding that the bodies of stars are also beings, the great watchers of heaven. And in witchcraft in particular, we understand, just as the early movement of Christians that we now call the Gnostics, we understand that a lot of the apocryphal lore that was passed down to us is incorrect. And so when we're looking at this idea of the fallen angels, what a lot of witches understand deeply mythopoetically is that these are the angels who fell in love with, in the book of Enoch, it says the daughters of man. So the sons of God fell in love with the daughters of man is the old tale. But in witchcraft, we talk about the fallen angels as fallen in love, and they broke the worlds apart in order to experience love. And this great cosmic force of something that is so in love, in the fool's journey of love, to link it back to the tarot, can change reality. And as we know, falling in love changes us, it changes our realities. And it can be quite terrifying. And so at the heart of it is this idea of becoming, back to the spell of becoming, of unfolding, of rapid and intense transformation. And also the angelic fire that lights someone up from within and allows them to see more than they ever saw. But that also, that kind of fiery gnosis. Gnosis is just like an old word that means kind of like divine knowing, sacred knowledge. That kind of gnosis can really be a lot. And so therefore one must need to know how to ground, how to sense and observe and relate to the life force well, how to journey and go into states of trance and come back really effectively, how to negotiate with your own boundaries, how to talk to the gods and do it respectfully, both to your own self and to them. And because when you're running this kind of fire, it can be precarious. And so, to the occultist, to the witch, to the mystic, one has to have really worked on a lot before allowing that kind of fire to kind of emblazon.
Excellent. I mean, you've really you've helped me tie in some of these different disciplines and see, of course I know that they're all interrelated, and yet you've really shown me how they come together so beautifully. I've not quite thought about angels that way and the celestial tie-in. I mean, obvious. But you are basically, you tied angels and astrology here for me just now, and that will be another show. I think that could be its own episode there, Fio, for sure. But I'd like to bring it back to a little bit of the book, and why don't we talk about the idea, the concept of a spell. I mean, I know, and we mentioned a little bit about what the book does and how the book is suggesting that. Yeah. But why don't you tell us, just for people that may not fully know, let's talk to us about the spell crafting.
Yeah, look, obviously anyone in the street who ever hears the word witch, they'll automatically almost always think of spells. It is completely true that witches, we cast and we work spells. And a spell, I see a lot out there, this conflation of prayer and spell, and really they are different because witches also pray. So let me kind of illustrate the difference. So to pray is to bring oneself into a kind of surrendered state to a divine being, whether it's to, the great infinite, to God herself, to to an angel who will intercede on your behalf, to a great spirit that we call a god, to Ganesh or to Kuan Yin or to Aphrodite, to pray, to bring oneself in surrender to a being and to ask for help, which is a powerful act. So I think prayer is powerful. But a spell is when one remembers that they are also invested with the same divine creative, that co-creative, which therefore is also co-destructive, like the creation and destruction that is the cosmos at all times. That we are invested with the same agency, with the same sovereignty, with the same power. And witches, we remember that, practice raising the power, we practice gathering it, sensing it, directing it, working with the plants, the stars, the river, the water, the raw elements of life, the gods who love us, the spirits who love us, the saints, witches we work with whoever is in divine relationship with us, respectfully and collaboratively. And so witch magic is never, there's this idea out there, I think, that witches are into control, and that is just like the exact opposite. Witches, we're into synergy, harmony, and co-creation. There are other forms of magic that are very compulsive and very control-based, but they're more ceremonial, really. But the witch magic, it's ecstatic and sensual. It's about relatedness and intimacy. So a spell arises out of that relatedness and intimacy. So we'll gather together, and the animistic understanding is that the plants aren't, the plants are alive. They're their own centers of consciousness. The herbs, the potions, the powders, the stars, the moment, even timing. Timing is divine essence. The moon, all of it. And we kind of come together in this like chorus, in this kind of like orchestrated chorus of a moment, out of time, out of place. And we usually it's quite ecstatic, but that could look really still, that could look like dancing and drumming, that could look like singing and rocking, whatever it is. And we gather the power through and with color and herb and attention and incantation, whatever it is. It could be very simple, it could be very ornate. And we kind of center our attention, and then we kind of saturate our consciousness with how do we want to feel, or how might it look, or how might it be if we have this and this in our lives, or if we are finally, released of this influence. And so we kind of saturate our consciousness with that possibility, and we bring through the power so that possibility begins to have a lot of gravitas. And then we release it down that road so that may be the road that rises to meet us. Because the thing is, in the infinities of possibility, anything can be possible. A lot of the fear of spellcraft comes from this very, very Protestant Christian idea that God has already preordained everything, that this transcendent kind of omnipotent God has preordained everything, and who are we lowly subjects to ever try to change that? And so that idea of the cosmos, that idea of existence, is so radically different to the witch's idea, which is that everything is always becoming, everything always can change, everything is always transformative, and that we are part of the body of God herself, that we too, therefore, are transformers and changers. And so that's what a spell is. It's an audacious act.
Bravo. Perfectly said. I love that. There's so much there. Everybody, you're going to want to listen to that again. Rewind and listen to that again. Thank you, Fio, very much so. I'm going to mention a quote from your book. The spell that we are enacting is the living spell of you and your intimacy with the life force and the mystery. So yeah. I'm basically reinforcing what you just said so eloquently, and just like a little snippet of what you're offering us with this book. So I always like to ask my guests, where do you feel we're at as a collective? I think there's increased interest, certainly, in the practice, in these spiritual practices. And I mean, check it out. Here I am with a show broadcasting speakers like yourself, writer, speaker, teacher, initiate of this to help people learn this. So how do you feel we're doing out there?
Oh, right now, how do I feel we're doing? I feel like, look, I think there is so much beauty in the world. I think we could. I think one of the great paradoxes of humankind on this planet is that we constantly seem to forget that we are a part of the planet, that we are a part of this solar system, that we are part of this galaxy. I think we're always looking beyond it, as if we can, as if we don't belong. This book is called The Witch Belongs to the World. We belong to each other. We belong to the earth and the stars. We are made of it all. It's so beautiful, and yet, there's so much horror, and there's so much pain and war and suffering, and really, I think we must get better, all of us, at being able to look at that directly, acknowledge it, and also still retain connection to the joy in our lives, the laughter in our lives, but not as an antidote to the looking at the pain. But these things are all here with us, and to be able to draw sustenance and inspiration from our intimacy, connection with each other, intimacy with the life force, and to be able to allow that to bolster us in whichever ways we will work for liberation or justice or freedom or truth. So we need to be doing that in the way that is personal for us, but also remembering that we are a thread in a collective, as you mentioned, and being able to empower each other and ourselves to do that. And so I think we're in a space where that is more, where people are more easily able to go to that state, to fall back into that state. I do see that more often now. And so I guess for that reason I have hope, even in the face of such upheaval.
Indeed. Yes, very much so. This has been fabulous. Everybody, go ahead and give us your website, right? Is it Fio Gede Parma? Is that right?
Yeah, that's it. That's correct.
All right. And for those listening, it's FIOGEDEPARMA.com. Your book is called The Witch Belongs to the World, A Spell of Becoming, out on Llewellyn, and I'm very grateful to have had the chance to talk to you, Fio. This is fantastic, and I hope you'll come to the studio here in Burbank, California sometime. We'd love to see you, and I send you every blessing in the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you kindly.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers, everybody. I'm Bonnie, and I'm here to help spread the light. There's a lot of people that are doing incredible work out there, and we're here to share that, as is Tony Sweet, who comes to us live Fridays at 3 p.m. Pacific with shows every week. So we hope that you will join in and the Truth Be Told audience and say hi to each other. Robert Hensley has shows as well. The Minuteman Report, we've got a whole big archive of work. And so I hope you'll check out our shows, follow, share. Again, we are here to help unravel some of the mysteries. And it's tricky out there. Life isn't easy, but there are tools and there is magic. So please tune in, be patient, and keep smiling and keep your heart open. Thanks for listening. Until the next time, shine on.